right? So there are life-changing opportunities here. This is why I want to say do a bigger deal. You might say, Brett, everything you just said sounds like so much work. It's so hard. Who cares if it's hard? It is a one and done type of deal. Put in the hard work for 2-3 years, and then you have this thing set up, right? This is where you get to financial freedom. This is the one and done type of deal that I got to. It was not easy, but it can be done. You can create these systems for it. You can pull yourself out of the business and then really get to the American dream here, right? What's up, mansion builders? Welcome back to Assisted Living Investing. I want to talk to you today about finding the right piece of property, the right piece of land in order to build new construction. Right, I think this is the best way to go. I've gone buying a house, converting it. I'm building out a neighborhood of assisted living mansions. We're doing that on 8 acres, and I can tell you from personal experience that you will have a better product. You will get to the two most important end goals for me, right? Financial freedom and time freedom. How do I get there? And it is through this vehicle, building new construction. It's not easy, so that's why I'm here sharing all the steps, all the failures, all the heartache, all the sleepless nights that I've had to go through. Let's just put the lessons out here. So today, let's talk about finding the right piece of property, specifically like a vacant piece of land, right? Like what should we look for? So I want to approach this from a few different angles here and show you, hey, here are the things that you should consider if you have a checklist for here's what a piece of land looks like. So let's start here from the top. When I am looking for a new piece of land, or one of our partners is, and they say, hey, Brett, can you take a look at this for me, right? Is this a deal I should look at? Here's where I'm guiding them, okay? When we are looking, I think you should not just look for vacant land, right? Like that is obviously what you're looking for, but you know what? You may not find all the available options out there. So in addition to looking at vacant land, I think you should also look at single family residence and mobile homes. So let me unpack that, because a lot of times when you are looking at land, you might be looking at 1 acre, 5 acres, 10 acres, right? You might be doing just one mansion. You might be building out a neighborhood of these in phases. So you might be looking at bigger property sizes. And a lot of times you might find 3 or 5 acre piece of property with a little dinky old house on it, right? Like some house that's 800 square feet that's like, this really needs to be torn down. But nonetheless, it's not listed as vacant land, right? It's listed as a single family house. Or perhaps it doesn't need to be torn down, right? Like it could be a rental. It's off to the side, right? It's on one side of the property and you still have 3 other acres on the other side. And you're like, boom, I can put 1 or 2 other mansions over here. There's a little rental house to cash flow while I'm under construction. Perhaps my manager can live there, whatever I want to do with it, right? Like I have an asset over here on the property, or I have something I can tear down, and maybe I already have utilities. Maybe I already have a city water line, a connection there. So I really like looking at all 3 of these things, the third one being mobile homes as well. Because a lot of times you have these old mobile homes, right, on this property, right? It's really just vacant land with a water utility, hopefully, and power coming down. And then you have this old crappy mobile home that you could literally just demo, or you could sell, or you could give away for free, right? You may be able to take that and just move it off to the side, and maybe that's an office or a storage or something like that. But nonetheless, it is pretty simple to say, hey, here is this mobile home. I don't want it here anymore. I'm going to build my mansion right here, and I'm going to get rid of this old mobile home or use it as storage. So it actually opens up your options by not triple, but probably more than that. And a lot of times in my experience, when you're looking at vacant land, the seller of this is coming in saying, hey, you're going to buy this vacant land. You're going to build this beautiful thing. It's going to be top of the market. And so they're pricing the land a little bit aggressive. Whereas sometimes you buy or you go to list a janky old house that's 800 square feet and it's like, hey, this thing's kind of a teardown, right? Like you're actually listing this thing kind of pretty competitively. And a lot of times I'll find that if it's 3 acres of vacant land or 3 acres of land with an average looking house on it, the price is almost the same. It's like, hey, I get a bonus house over here. And if that bonus house does happen to be off to the side, then cool, I got 2 acres of vacant land and an acre with a house over here, and I'm gonna cash flow that house, and pretty much I got it for free, right? So I like to go from this perspective, start with more options. That is the best thing you wanna do. Have a bigger cup, take more information in, and then learn to throw out some of the things that are not important. So now let's talk about what are the things we need to throw out, right? Like what should we be looking for? So let's first start with size, because if you're gonna build one mansion, I like to have about 1 acre as a minimum. And it can be, right, 0.9 acres, or it can be 1.5. Heck, it can be 20 acres if you want. It's just, I think that 1 acre is a great minimum place. And you can squeeze a building on a half acre, right? It will actually fit. But you're gonna have all your parking right in front. It's gonna look terrible. It's gonna look like a commercial small box, right? Like some other facility. So if you have 1 acre and 1 mansion, you have plenty of space to actually have it look nice. You can put your staff parking off to the side or the back. You can have a front yard. You can have a backyard. It can be this sprawling mansion. It can be beautiful. So 1 acre equals beautiful, right? Half acre, not so beautiful. It looks very commercial. But you can obviously have bigger. So if you're gonna be looking at 1 mansion, consider 1 acre or more. If you're gonna be looking at 2 mansions, maybe 3 acres or more. For me, I bought 8 acres and I'm building 4 mansions on there. And it's almost like each mansion has 2 acres, right? They're their next door neighbors. They're not close to each other at all. They have a front yard, they have a backyard, they have their own driveway, they have a mailbox, right? Like they're big mansions with like next door neighbors, right? So come at it from that perspective. How do you build something like that out? And you can do it in that way where you can buy a bigger piece of property, come in phase 1, build 1, cash out refi phase 2, build number 2, and just keep kicking the can down the road, right? Until you have your exit strategy and you go to sell to some big corporate REIT or something like that with some huge deal. So the next thing that's important to consider is the actual shape. Even if you have 1 acre and you say, hey, Brett says, I have 1 acre, it's gonna fit. It might not fit, right? A rectangle is different than a square. So really, I like about a 200 by 200 foot section. That's really a square, right? It's almost an acre. A perfect acre is almost that size, right? So if you have more than that, great. But if you have, 130 length and, 250 feet deep, that's really not gonna work, right? That's too tight. Because these buildings are big, right? They are large buildings. They're not like a long pencil, right? Like they're an L, they're an H, they're all these different shapes that are big and sprawling. And my mansions, they're about 155 feet across the front and 130 deep, all right? And ours is kind of designed more of an L shape. So they're big in both directions, right? I need plenty of space, and then I need parking. There's setbacks. I have a front yard. I have a backyard. I can't squeeze this in. Even if I had 150 by 150, you say, yeah, it technically fits. Yes, but it really doesn't, right? There's gonna be other things that need to go on this property. So consider the shape of this, because a skinny rectangle at 1 acre is not the same as a square at 1 acre. So the next thing that's important to consider is the actual usable space. How much of this land is usable? Because if it's not usable, you can still buy it, but you just can't count that, right? So some of the things to consider: is it in the floodplain? It's pretty simple. You can go to FEMA's website, drop in the address, and it'll show you with a map, like here's the flood zone, right? Like here's the 100-year, here's the 500-year, all that kind of stuff. So you can buy properties, just don't put your building in it, right? Don't put your driveway in it. If you have a 1 acre property and it has half of it in the flood zone, that's not a 1 acre property that's usable, right? It's just a half acre. But if you have 5 acres and the corner of it is in the flood zone, that's no big deal. You probably have 4.5 acres of usable space. So consider that. You might have a property that has tons of trees on it, right? Like huge foresty area. You know what? Trees can be knocked down. It is not that expensive to be able to go and clear all those different trees out, right? You can definitely do that. Same with some slopage. If you have an unlevel pocket of your property where it's kind of a belly, it drops down, it's not that hard to bring in a bunch of earth and pack that thing down, right? You can do that. But just don't have like some crazy steep cliff, right? Like that right there, that's not something that is usable. So a big, massive hillside, no, that's space you can't use. But little slopes that are with a gentle roll, yeah, we can definitely make that work. So this next one, I had no idea what it meant when I first got into this game. It's the term impervious coverage, right? And they would say at the city planning meeting, hey, Brett, you can't have more than 60% impervious coverage or something like that, right? That's an important lesson. As you're going to look at some of these pieces of land, you're talking to the city, what is the maximum buildable space that I can use? And they may throw out the term impervious coverage, which really means it's the ground that is covered by concrete, that is covered by asphalt, right? It's where rain cannot absorb into the ground because you've covered it. So the objective for the city or for the regulating body is to have your rain stay on your property and absorb into your earth, right? If your entire earth is covered by concrete, then it can't absorb there. It rolls off onto your neighbor's property and it floods the neighbor's property, it floods the street, right? They want your water on your property to absorb. So they may say, hey, you know what? You have a certain percentage of your land that you are able to cover, right? That would include the building, that would include the front porch, that would include the sidewalks, the driveway, everything that is impervious. If water can't get into the ground, that's impervious. So you may say, hey, you know what? I have this 1 acre property. It's the perfect place. And the city comes and says, well, yeah, that you can do this, but you know what? You have a limit of 40% impervious coverage. Really, if you have 44,000 square feet and they say 40% of that, what's that, like 16,000 or something, right? Like that's how much square footage you can. And if your building's 10,000 square feet, that only leaves 6,000 square feet for all of your parking area and your driveway and all that kind of stuff, right? It may be a deal killer. So this is important to check these things out. The same with setbacks, right? If you have a little bit of a tight piece of property, it's 180 feet across and you're like, oh, I think I make this work. What are those setbacks? Do you have 25 feet on the left and the right side? Because now you just lost 50 feet. So you may look at a piece of property and say, hey, I have all the space I need to build one of these things exactly the way I want. But the city may say, no, you don't. You have limitations on how much ground you can cover. So those are one of the things that I would go and check as I'm looking at these pieces of property. The last one I want to talk to you about is utilities. Utilities can make or break a deal. A lot of times there are deal killers with utilities, especially with the water. So let's talk through these things. You have power, you have water, you have sewer, you have internet, right? Those are the 4 things that are important to me. So you have to have power, right? We're not going to be off the grid, but is it single phase power or is it 3-phase power? Do you need 3-phase? Is it available? Are you able to bring it over to you, right? And essentially just look up at the power lines. Do you see 1 line at the top or do you see 4? Because if there's 4, it's your 3 power lines plus a neutral, right? That's 3-phase coming to you. It may be at the street. It may not be at your property. Can you bring it over to you? Would you need it? And you can design the buildings and all the electrical things to run on single phase. But if you have big pieces of equipment, fire pumps or maybe your HVACs or electric water heaters, you may need 3-phase for some of those things. The water is the next thing that I would consider. You need 2 types of water. You need potable water, which means that's the water you're going to drink. What size line is there? Is it enough to be able to have that many sinks and showers going at the same time, right? If you have a 1-inch line coming up to the existing property, is that enough? Probably not. 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches if you're going to have 1 mansion. I think that'd be great. But if you had 1 inch, that might be a little on the tight side. What about your fire line? You need fire suppression, right? Do you need a 6-inch, an 8-inch in order to run this kind of thing? And really, these are questions for the fire marshal, right? Do you have a residential type of fire sprinkler system, which is, like some type of PVC system? Or do you have a commercial system, which is a steel system, which uses way more volume of water and way more pressure? And you're gonna need, realistically, a bigger amount of water there. If you can use the city water line there, you probably need at least a 6 or an 8-inch to be able to do that, or you need to supplement that with a tank and pump. So that right there is honestly a big deal killer. The water is super important and it is very much dependent on your fire marshal. What type of fire sprinklers do you need? Do you need a fire hydrant there, right? Is there even fire hydrants available in your area? Some of these utilities are so important to consider. The next is sewer. I've done sewer and septic. Now, obviously sewer is much easier, but for me, I'm usually always septic because for me, I like to be outside of the city limits. That's a zoning technique that I like to use. And usually when I'm outside of the city limits, there's no sewer lines there, right? That's city property. I'm outside in the county limits and I have to put in my own septic. And at least for our county, we have to go through a commercial septic process and it's a big old septic system. But nonetheless, I can do it. It's not that difficult to maintain. There are some issues with diapers and clogging and things like that, but it's definitely far from a little dinky residential system. It is a massive, massive system and you do need a lot of space for it. So you can get it done with septic. You can obviously get it done with sewer. Sewer is for sure preferable, but all of these things are give and take. The last thing that I would say is internet. You definitely need internet where you're at, right? I have switched off of cable. Everything that we do is high-speed internet. All of the TVs, everything is smart. The electronics that we use med passing apps that we really need high-speed internet to be able to pass these meds effectively. So that is what we do. I want to make sure that I can get fast internet in my locations. So these are the things that I consider while I'm looking at different pieces of property. I want to check zoning and then I want to make sure the numbers work. I will put this whole thing into my model. I will have all of my income, all of my expenses, my vacancy. I'm going to have everything line item and play the whole thing forward to find out, Does this pencil? Will this work? For me, for my niche, I think that you should have at least $100,000 a month of income. When you charge rent to your grandmas and grandpas, you need top line income of 100 grand. That right there will get me to my two goals. I can, from this point, hire great staff 24/7. I can have caregivers there. I can hire a chef. I can hire multiple managers. So really, I have my time freedom, right? My kids are little. I want to be at all of their games, all their events. I want to travel. I'm working less than 4 hours a week. It is because of the niche. I cannot do it with a 6-bed, an 8-bed, a 10-bed. I can't do it with a 12-bed. I have to do it with a number that works. And for me, 16, that is the deal. That's why that's all the thing I talk about. I only build 16s. All my partners, we're doing 16s, right? This is where it's at. So make sure it works because I want to hit that time freedom and I want to hit my financial freedom. With these metrics, you can safely make 30 grand a month. With 100 grand a month coming in, you can cover your payroll, you can cover your mortgage, you can have a huge profit, at least 30. I consistently make 40 on my home conversion. Our new construction mansions will be closer to 50,000+ a month per mansion, right? So there are life-changing opportunities here. This is why I want to say do a bigger deal. You might say, Brett, everything you just said sounds like so much work. It's so hard. Who cares if it's hard? It is a one and done type of deal. Put in the hard work for 2-3 years and then you have this thing set up, right? This is where you get to financial freedom. This is the one and done type of deal that I got to. It was not easy. And this is the real estate side. The operation side is not easy either, right? It's probably more difficult, but it can be done. You can create these systems for it. You can pull yourself out of the business and then really get to the American dream here, right? I did it through this model. I'm sure there's other things you can do, but I'm here to show you this is how you do it in assisted living. It does not work. It will not work on the dinky little RELs. So to give you guys some next steps, I created a free training called my location selection training. I go through everything we just talked about in a really deep level view. Finding the land, working with realtors, going through the deal killers, my due diligence checklist, talking to the city, talking to the fire marshal, all of those things. So it is something that I wish I would have had. I had to learn this the hard way. That's why I built this thing out and it is free. It's on memorycaremansion.com. Hit that free training link. And this is something that I hope that you enjoy and appreciate. So wrapping this up for today, I just have one ask. I don't run any ads. I don't sell anything on the show. My objective is to get this information out to as many people as possible to change other entrepreneurs' lives. So I would ask that you would like this, you would share it with someone else, hopefully make a difference in their life. And thank you so much for being with me on another episode of Assisted Living Investing.